The chosen one and the abyss of purposelessness, why your existential crisis is a sign of awakening. I see the burden you carry, my friend, not the petty troubles of unpaid bills or broken hearts. Those are the concerns of the valley dwellers, the herd that chews its cud in comfortable numbness. No, your burden is far more terrible, far more noble. You carry the weight of purposelessness in a world drunk on distractions, the unbearable lightness of being that crushes precisely because it whispers a question the masses dare not ask. What is the meaning of my existence? You wake at 3 a.m., not because of anxiety. That would be too simple, too treatable, with the pills the pharmaceutical shepherds peddle to their flock. You wake because your soul is starving in a banquet of garbage, because every fiber of your being recoils at the thought of another day performing the theater of normalcy, another sunrise wasted on tasks that nourish nothing, that build nothing eternal. The herd calls this depression. I call it the first tremor of awakening. They try to sedate you with their mantras. Find your passion. Live, laugh, love. Everything happens for a reason. These are the opiates of slave morality, designed to keep you docile, to prevent you from asking the one question that terrifies the mediocre. What if there is no inherent meaning? And what if that is precisely where my power begins? Listen carefully. Between the 150th and 250th heartbeat of this revelation, I must tell you something. For those with ears to hear, I have left the map to exit the labyrinth in the pinned comment in my trilogy, The 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life. But know this, the map is useless if the legs refuse to walk, if the will remains chained to the comfort of victimhood. The first step represents not the discovery of your purpose, but the destruction of the lie that purpose is something found rather than forged in the furnace of your becoming. Now, steel yourself. What I am about to reveal will either liberate you or send you running back to the warm embrace of collective delusion. The diagnosis: you are not broken, you are starving. The purposelessness that gnaws at your bones is not pathology, it is aristocratic hunger. Your spirit is a bird of prey that has been caged since childhood, fed the grain of slave values, obedience, humility, selflessness, the worship of weakness disguised as compassion. Your parents, bless their small souls, taught you that wanting more was greed, that standing apart was arrogance, that your strange hungers were proof of moral deficiency. They fed you this poison because it was the only food they knew, having been fed it themselves by a culture terrified of greatness. But your body knows what your mind has been trained to deny. The nausea you feel scrolling through social media, watching the herd celebrate its own mediocrity with participation trophies and virtue signals. This is not cynicism. This is your immune system rejecting the virus of modern nihilism, the disease that convinces human beings they are merely economic units, consumers to be managed, problems to be solved with the next app, the next pill, the next shallow philosophy that promises happiness without demanding transformation. The will to power speaks through your disgust. When you feel that tightening in your chest at family gatherings, when every word feels like a betrayal of your authentic self, when you smile and nod while internally screaming, this is not social anxiety. This is your soul in rebellion against the tyranny of the average, your deepest nature refusing to be domesticated by the mediocrity merchants who run this civilization like a cattle farm. Consider the physiology of this condition. Your nervous system is designed for challenges that no longer exist in this soft world of climate-controlled offices and algorithmically curated realities. You were built for the mountain, for the storm, for the existential war against entropy itself. And instead you are offered a cubicle, a Netflix subscription, and the promise that if you just practice gratitude and live in the moment, the howling void inside you will somehow fill itself. Of course you feel purposeless. You are a sword being used to butter bread, a lion being asked to perform tricks for treats. The question is not how do I find my purpose, but rather how do I unlearn the slave morality that has convinced me my purpose should feel comfortable, should be socially acceptable, should earn the approval of people who have never once risked anything for a vision they couldn't explain. Let me strike the hammer against this concept of purpose and hear its hollow ring. The herd has weaponized this word, turned it into another form of spiritual commerce. They tell you to follow your passion, as if passion is a treasure map rather than a fire that must be lit through friction, through the grinding of your will against the resistance of reality itself. They sell you vision boards and manifestation journals, as if the universe is a cosmic vending machine waiting for you to insert the correct sequence of positive thoughts. This is the ultimate inversion of values. They have taken the Nietzschean imperative to create meaning and transformed it into a passive search for pre-packaged purpose, as if your destiny is sitting on a shelf somewhere waiting to be discovered, like a forgotten jar of jam. They have convinced you that if you just consume enough TED Talks, attend enough workshops, hire enough coaches, the answer will arrive from outside, when the terrible truth, the liberating truth, is that purpose is not discovered, but decided, not found, but forged in the laboratory of your lived experience, the genealogy of your paralysis. Understanding why they want you. Confused now, we descend into darker waters. Why does this culture produce such epidemic purposelessness? Why do millions of young people, the ones with the most potential, the most sensitivity, the most capacity for greatness, find themselves paralyzed, unable to commit to any path, drowning in optionality while starving for direction? The answer is simple and terrible. A confused population is a controllable population. The modern world does not want you to have purpose, not real purpose, the kind that makes you dangerous, ungovernable, impossible to manipulate with fear or flattery. What it wants is for you to seek purpose endlessly, to remain in a perpetual state of searching that keeps you consuming content, consuming products, consuming ideologies that change with the season like fashion trends. This is the genius of slave morality in its current form. It does not forbid greatness. That would be too obvious, too crude. Instead, it makes greatness impossible to define, surrounds it with so much relativism and contradiction that the moment you reach for something transcendent, 1,000 voices arise to remind you that your ambition is probably just privilege, your standards are probably just internalized oppression. Your hunger is probably just toxic masculinity or problematic perfectionism. They have made strength suspicious and weakness sacred. Every natural impulse towards self-overcoming has been pathologized. Want to build something that lasts? That is ego. Want to separate yourself from mediocrity? That is elitism. Want to speak uncomfortable truths? That is violence. The entire apparatus of modern discourse is designed to keep the strong weak, to convince those with the capacity for greatness that their very nature is the disease, that the cure is to become more like everyone else, smaller, safer, more apologetic for existing. And if you resist, if you dare to say, no, I will not prostrate myself before the altar of equality, I will not pretend that all values are equal and all paths lead to the same tepid nowhere, then you are labeled, isolated, made to feel that your inability to fit in is proof of moral failure rather than spiritual superiority. This is the scapegoat mechanism in its purest form. You carry what the herd cannot face, the knowledge that most lives are wasted, that most purposes are elaborate justifications for cowardice, that the vast majority of human beings will die without ever having truly lived because they were too terrified to separate from the warm prison of collective approval. Your family, those well-meaning jailers, sense this dangerous difference in you from the beginning. Perhaps you asked too many questions as a child. Perhaps you refused to be satisfied with the easy answers, the comfortable lies. Perhaps they saw in your eyes a hunger that frightened them because it reminded them of the hunger they strangled in themselves decades ago. So they did what all terrified people do. They tried to normalize you, to press your square soul into their round holes. They praised you when you conformed and withdrew affection when you deviated. They taught you that love was conditional on smallness, that belonging required betrayal of your deepest nature. And when this produced the inevitable result, a young person split between their authentic self and their performed self, between their private dreams and their public persona. They called it mental health issues and sent you to professionals trained in the art of adjustment, the priests of the psychiatric order whose sacrament is not transformation, but management. But here is what they never told you, what they could not tell you because they do not know it themselves. Your inability to find purpose in their world is not a bug, it is a feature. Your discontent is not pathology, it is diagnosis. You are the canary in the coal mine of civilizational decay, and the poison that is killing you is the same poison that is slowly suffocating everyone. They have just grown so accustomed to the stench that they no longer notice they are dying. The purposelessness you feel is the purposelessness of the age itself, concentrated in your nervous system because you are sensitive enough to detect it, honest enough to admit it, and strong enough, yes, strong, though you do not yet believe it, to potentially do something about it. Consider the genealogy of this wound more carefully. Modern man has murdered God. Nietzsche announced this not as celebration, but as diagnosis, as warning. The death of God meant the death of the transcendent value systems that, for better or worse, gave human life a vertical dimension, a hierarchy of meaning that pointed upward towards something beyond mere survival and reproduction. What has replaced it? The horizontal sprawl of consumer capitalism, the endless buffet of equivalent choices where purpose has been reduced to personal preference, where the question, "What should I do with my life?" is answered with, "Whatever makes you happy," as if happiness is the highest value, as if the entire weight of your existence should be balanced on such a thin, slippery concept. This is the hidden cruelty of non-judgmental culture. By refusing to say, this way is better than that way, by insisting that all paths are equally valid, it has actually made genuine choice impossible. How can you choose when there are no criteria for judgment? How can you commit when every commitment is just one option among infinite others? When every path taken is simultaneously an infinite number of paths not taken? They have given you freedom without foundation, choice without hierarchy, possibility without purpose, and then blamed you for being paralyzed by it. The body rebels. Your digestion suffers because you are trying to metabolize spiritual poison. Your sleep fractures because your soul is fighting a war your mind refuses to acknowledge. Your energy vanishes because you are spending it all maintaining the performance of normalcy, the exhausting theater of pretending that what satisfies the herd could ever satisfy you. This is what the doctors miss. Your depression is not chemical, or rather, the chemical is the result, not the cause. The cause is existential. You are dying of spiritual starvation in a world that has convinced itself that souls do not exist, that meaning is a cognitive bias to be corrected, that the hunger for transcendence is just evolutionary firmware that served our ancestors, but is now obsolete in the age of antidepressants and social safety nets. How many truths can you bear to hear right now? Because we are only beginning. The biology of the chosen. Why your body knows what your mind denies. Let us speak of physiology, for the body is more honest than the mind. The mind can be trained to lie, to rationalize, to construct elaborate philosophies that justify cowardice. But the The body tells the truth through its symptoms, through its refusals, through its rebellions against a life unlived. Your chronic fatigue is not laziness, it is the exhaustion of a spirit forced to wear a mask 16 hours a day. The mask of the good employee, the agreeable friend, the normal person who laughs at jokes they don't find funny and nods along with conversations that make their soul scream. This performance requires enormous energy, and you are spending it all on being someone you are not, leaving nothing for becoming who you are. Your insomnia is not a disorder. It is your soul refusing to let another day end without being truly lived. The 3 a.m. awakening is not anxiety, but a desperate attempt by your deeper self to get your attention, to break through the numbing routine of your days with a question that cannot be silenced. Is this all there is? Is this what you came here to do? The herd sleeps soundly because they have made peace with meaninglessness, because they have traded the anguish of freedom for the comfort of predefined roles. They are not troubled by existential questions because they have successfully convinced themselves that such questions are signs of immaturity, that real adults simply accept reality and focus on practical things like mortgages and retirement planning. But you cannot sleep because you are allergic to spiritual death, because some part of you, call it soul, call it will to power, call it the demon, refuses to let you waste your one wild and precious life on the accumulation of comforts and the avoidance of discomfort. Your social exhaustion is not introversion, it is the immune response of a superior organism to a toxic environment. When you feel drained after spending time with normal people, it is not because you are weak or antisocial. It is because you are spending every moment of that interaction suppressing your authentic reactions, translating your complex thoughts into simple language they can digest, pretending that their concerns could ever concern you, nodding politely while they discuss their fantasies about Netflix shows and their opinions about celebrities, as if these things matter, as if these things could ever matter to someone with your depth of vision. The exhaustion comes from the betrayal of your own intelligence, your own standards, your own hunger for conversations that have weight, for connections that have depth, for exchanges that leave both parties transformed rather than merely entertained. And here is the terrible irony. The herd mistakes your withdrawal for arrogance. When you stop performing the pretense of interest, when you stop pretending that small talk is somehow polite rather than a form of spiritual violence, they accuse you of thinking you are better than them. But this is projection. They are the ones obsessed with hierarchies of status, with the endless social calculations of who is above and below. You are not withdrawing because you think you are better. You are withdrawing because you are different, because continued proximity to their value system is literally making you sick. Consider your digestive issues, and yes, I know you have them, because they are the hallmark of the chosen one, trying to metabolize a culture that is fundamentally indigestible. You cannot process their values any more than you can process poison. Your gut, that second brain, that ancient seat of intuition, is in constant rebellion because it knows what your socialized mind has been trained to deny, that this way of life is killing you, that these values are toxic, that continued participation in this system is incompatible with your thriving. The irritable bowel, the acid reflux, the nausea that arrives when you contemplate your daily routine, these are not diseases to be managed with medication. They are messages to be heeded, symptoms of a soul-body split that cannot be medicated away because the problem is not in your biochemistry, but in the fundamental contradiction between who you are and what you are pretending to be. Your body is trying to expel the poison of slave morality, and the harder you try to force yourself to swallow it, to be normal, to be realistic, to accept the life that satisfies everyone else, the sicker you become. This is not weakness. This is a kind of strength so fundamental that it precedes conscious choice. Your organism is refusing at a cellular level to participate in its own degradation. And the panic attacks? Oh, those beautiful, terrible panic attacks that arrive without warning, that flood your system with adrenaline in the middle of a meeting or a dinner party or a normal Tuesday afternoon. Those are not malfunctions. Those are your deep self, your will to power screaming, "Get out! This is not your life. You are suffocating in someone else's dream." The herd tells you these are irrational fears because they have trained themselves not to feel the terror of wasted existence. They have numbed themselves to the horror of their own slow death, and so they pathologize your honest reaction to it. They medicate your panic because your panic reveals their own suppressed terror, the knowledge, buried deep but never entirely killed, that they too are living in a cage, that they too have betrayed their deepest nature for the sake of security and belonging. But your body will not let you forget. It rebels through 1,000 small mutinies. The tension in your jaw from biting back words you need to speak. The tightness in your chest from breathing the thin air of inauthenticity. The chronic pain that has no medical cause because its cause is metaphysical. The pain of a life unlived, of potential unrealized, of days passing like water through your fingers while you wait for permission that will never come, for a sign that has already been given in the language of your own discontent. Understand this: your symptoms are not the problem. They are the solution attempting to break through. They are your will to power trying to force a transformation that your conscious mind is too frightened to initiate. The body knows that slow death is still death, that comfort can be a form of killing, that safety can be the most dangerous choice of all. Listen to it. Feel into these symptoms not as enemies to be defeated, but as allies offering intelligence from the depths. What is your fatigue protecting you from? What is your insomnia trying to tell you? What life is your panic trying to panic you out of? And what life is it trying to panic you into? The herd will never ask these questions because they have decided that adaptation is success, that the ability to tolerate misery is maturity, that anyone who cannot adjust to the unbearable must be broken rather than the system that breaks them. But you are not here to adjust. You are here to overcome. And that brings us to the question that terrifies every person standing at this threshold. What must I overcome first? The world that crushes me? Or the part of myself that still seeks its approval? The transfiguration, from victim to creator. Now we arrive at the turning point, the moment where the reactive force must become creative force, where the one who has been acted upon becomes the actor, where the sufferer of meaninglessness becomes the author of meaning. This is the alchemy the herd cannot perform, and therefore does not believe in. They think meaning is discovered, that purpose is assigned, that your value must be validated by external authorities, by degrees, by job titles, by social media metrics, by the nodding approval of people whose own lives are monuments to compromise. But I tell you, meaning is not found, it is forged. Purpose is not discovered, it is decided. Value is not earned, it is declared. This is the first and most difficult lesson of the will to power, that you are not a passive recipient of reality, but an active shaper of it, that the universe is not a fixed script you must learn to perform, but raw material you must learn to sculpt. Everything you have been taught about finding yourself is slave morality, designed to keep you searching forever, to keep you dependent on external validation, to prevent you from ever claiming the terrible freedom that comes with being your own authority. Think of what they have trained you to do. You wake up and immediately check your phone, not to see what you want to create today, but to see what others have created for you to consume. You scroll through feeds that algorithmically determine what deserves your attention. You work on projects someone else defined as valuable. You pursue goals that were implanted in your consciousness by advertising, by social pressure, by the invisible hand of cultural programming. You have been living as a puppet and wondering why your life feels meaningless. Of course it feels meaningless. You are not living it. It is being lived through you by forces you have never examined, by values you never chose, by definitions of success you never questioned. The transfiguration begins with a single act of will, so simple that most will dismiss it, so radical that most will never attempt it. You must learn to say no, not the weak no of passive resistance, not the resentful no of the victim who refuses but remains fixated on what they refuse. I mean the sacred no, the aristocratic no, the no that clears space for an even more powerful yes. The no that says, this may satisfy the herd, but I am not of the herd. This may be enough for those who have learned to live on scraps, but I was born for a feast. The no that rejects the very premise of the question, what does society want me to do? And replaces it with the only question that matters. What do I want to create? Start small, but be absolute. When they invite you to the meaningless gathering, to the soul-numbing event, to the performance of normalcy that will leave you depleted, say no. When they pressure you to pursue the sensible path, the safe career, the respectable compromise, say no. When they try to guilt you with their disappointment, their confusion, their hurt feelings because you refuse to be who they need you to be, say no. Each no is a death, the death of a false self, the death of an implanted expectation, the death of a version of you that was designed by others for their convenience. And each death clears ground for new growth, for the emergence of something that was buried under all that borrowed identity, all that performed personality, all that desperate seeking of approval from people whose approval should mean nothing to you. But the no alone is not enough. Negative freedom is merely the first stage. If you stop there, you become the perpetual rebel, the eternal adolescent who defines himself only by what he opposes, who remains psychologically chained to the very authorities he claims to reject. The second stage is harder. You must learn to affirm. You must decide what you value, what you will build, what meaning you will create in the void that appears when you stop filling your life with other people's purposes. This is where most fail. They successfully escape the herd, but then find themselves in the desert, surrounded by infinite possibility and paralyzed by it. They wait for a revelation, for a burning bush, for some sign from the universe that will tell them what to do next. They expect purpose to arrive from outside now that they have cleared space for it. But the revelation never comes because you are waiting for someone to give you permission to be great when the entire point is that there is no one left to give permission. So you must give it to yourself. You must declare, with nothing but your own will as authority, this is what matters to me. This is what I will build. This is the meaning I will create in this meaningless universe. This is the moment of true terror and true liberation. Terror because you are now responsible, not to God, not to society, not to your parents, but to yourself, to the vision you are capable of holding. Liberation because you are finally, for the first time in your life, free. Free from the need to justify your choices to anyone. Free from the requirement to make sense to people who will never understand. Free from the prison of other people's expectations. What should this self-created purpose be? The herd wants an answer, wants a formula. Just do what you love. Follow your passion. Find your why. All of these are variations of the same slave morality, the same assumption that purpose should be easy, should feel good, should be immediately recognizable and socially acceptable. But I tell you, true purpose is discovered through resistance, not resonance. It is found not in what comes easily, but in what you are willing to suffer for, not in what makes you happy, but in what makes you more capable, more powerful, more fully yourself. Your purpose is revealed in your obstacles. What makes you rage with frustration? What problems do you return to obsessively despite having no obligation to solve them? What injustices, what inefficiencies, what stupidities in the world make your blood boil, not with the impotent rage of the victim, but with the creative fury of someone who sees how things should be? These are not random irritations. They are your calling, speaking the only language it knows, the language of discontent. The herd is content, and so the herd creates nothing, changes nothing, improves nothing. The chosen ones are discontent, and it is precisely this divine discontent that makes them dangerous, that gives them the energy to do what everyone else thinks is impossible. Consider how this works physiologically. When you encounter something that violates your deep values, your body produces stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. The herd has been trained to interpret this as negativity, as something to be avoided or medicated away. But this is a catastrophic misunderstanding. That physiological activation is energy, it is fuel, it is your will to power recognizing an opportunity to assert itself, to shape reality rather than merely endure it. The question is not, how do I make this anger go away, but rather, how do I transform this anger into action? This rage into discipline, this discontent into creation. Here is a practice, simple but transformative. The inventory of rage. Each evening, write down 3 things that made you genuinely angry today. Not annoyed, not mildly frustrated, truly angry. Then ask of each, what would have to be true for this to no longer be a problem? What would I need to build, learn, become, or create to solve this? You will notice patterns. The same categories of problem will recur. These are not random. They are your purpose trying to announce itself. You are not angry about everything. You are angry about specific things. And those specific things are where your unique capacity to contribute is hiding. The chosen one does not seek a life without conflict. They seek a conflict worthy of their strength. They do not want peace. They want a war they can win, a challenge that demands their full capacity, a project that requires them to become more than they currently are. This is amor fati in practice, not accepting reality as it is, but embracing the challenge of reality as the raw material for your transformation. Every obstacle becomes a teacher, every limitation becomes an edge to push against. Every failure becomes data, every setback becomes strategy refinement. And this is crucial, this requires a fundamental shift in identity. You must stop seeing yourself as someone to whom life happens and start seeing yourself as someone who happens to life. You must transition from consumer to creator, from victim to artist, from someone searching for their purpose to someone creating it with every choice, every risk, every refusal to accept the limits that satisfy everyone else. Can you feel the shift? Can you feel the weight of this responsibility and the lightness of this freedom existing simultaneously? That vertigo is healthy. That uncertainty is appropriate. You are standing at the edge of everything you have known, about to leap into everything you might become.